In the Gaza Strip, militant groups Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad announced the transfer of a deceased hostage's body, reportedly located north of Khan Yunis, to be handed over at 8 p.m. Israel time. The Israeli military will receive the remains and carry out forensic analysis. According to Israeli authorities, this comes amid a broader hostage and remains negotiation process. Only 3 bodies of hostages remain in Gaza after the latest transfer. The ceasefire in Gaza remains fragile, with the southern city of Rafah still described as a flashpoint. Israeli forces say they eliminated 4 armed militants along the so-called Yellow Line north of Khan Yunis over the past 24 hours. In Rafah, troops reported identifying 4 fighters emerging from underground tunnels. 3 were killed in that action, and 1 separate incident involved a militant crossing into Israeli-controlled territory and being shot. The Israeli army says around 200 militants remain hiding in terror pockets in Rafah. Meanwhile, strikes were carried out targeting houses and infrastructure beyond the Yellow Line. In parallel, the military of Israel Defense Forces, IDF, is conducting what it calls an unprecedented readiness exercise in the West Bank and Jordan Valley, a dual-division drill involving the Judea and Samaria Division alongside the new 96th Division, focusing on rapid mobilization, urban combat and infiltration scenarios. The IDF's Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, condemned recent violent incidents by extremist Israeli civilians against Palestinians, stating, "I strongly reject these acts." The IDF will not tolerate a criminal minority that damages a law-abiding society. These actions cross a red line, divert our forces from their mission, and contradict our values. We will deal with them severely until justice is served. On the diplomatic and judicial front, tensions between Israel and the United States emerged after Donald Trump, as U.S. president, wrote to Israeli President Isaac Herzog, urging him to pardon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is standing trial on corruption charges. Trump called the prosecution political, unjustified, and praised Netanyahu as a formidable and decisive wartime prime minister. Netanyahu has publicly stated he will neither request a pardon nor admit guilt, saying that's not going to happen. Nobody suggests that that's what I'll do, and I certainly won't do that. In response, Herzog's office emphasized that any pardon must follow established procedures initiated by the individual under prosecution, not by a foreign head of state. At the intelligence leadership level, the head of Israel's Foreign Intelligence Service, Mossad, David Barnea, announced he will step down in June 2026. Barnea, who has served since 2021 and was the last senior defense official still in office from the time of the October 7 attack, informed Prime Minister Netanyahu of his decision, and a successor search is already underway. On the propaganda and regional escalation front, Iran has released a Hebrew-language film produced by its state-affiliated agency Tasnim news agency titled Missiles over Bazan. The 26-minute documentary targets Hebrew-speaking audiences in Israel, claims significant Iranian missile strikes on Haifa's oil refinery during their 12-day conflict with Israel, and presents Iran's narrative of battlefield success. Tehran is also showcasing its missile and drone arsenal at an Aerospace Week exhibition at the IRGC Aerospace Force Museum, even as the regime remains under strain from a deepening water crisis, electricity and gas shortages, and international sanctions. Similarly, in Gaza, the humanitarian and security situations remain precarious. The handover of remains is part of the broader ceasefire deal, under which 25 deceased Israeli hostages have been returned and hundreds of Palestinian bodies exchanged. Here's a closer look at the key issues. Militant groups in Gaza confirmed a body handover for 8 p.m. local time, reportedly located north of Khan Yunis. Israel received the remains of 73-year-old Israeli hostage Meni Godard, who was abducted in the 7th of October 2023 massacre, and confirmed his identity via forensic analysis. 3 hostage remains still remain in Gaza. As part of the ceasefire deal, 20 surviving hostages were released by Hamas in exchange for prisoners and the remains of 28 hostages. In turn, Israel has released thousands of Palestinian prisoners and handed over hundreds of Palestinian bodies. Meanwhile, on the ground, the IDF reports that militants remain active in Rafah, using tunnel networks and command pockets north of the Yellow Line. There are reported strikes by the IDF on militant infrastructure deeper in Gaza. The ceasefire holds in name, but the southern sector remains volatile. The Israeli military has conducted a 3-day drill involving 2 divisions together for the first time: the Judea and Samaria Division and the newly formed 96th Division. Some 180 aircraft, special forces deployments and 40 extreme scenarios were practiced, including cross-border infiltrations from the Jordan Valley, urban combat and mass casualty response. Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir linked these exercises directly to lessons from October 7. One of the lessons is that responsibility for a defence and our security concept must change. We prevent threats while they are forming. He emphasised the need to act proactively. Zamir also addressed violent incidents by extremist Israeli civilians targeting Palestinians. I strongly reject these. The IDF will not tolerate a criminal minority that damages a law-abiding society. These actions cross a red line, divert our forces from their mission and contradict our values. We will deal with them severely until justice is served. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on trial in 3 corruption cases charged with bribery, fraud and breach of trust. He denies wrongdoing, calls the trial a politically motivated witch hunt and has refused to seek a pardon that implies guilt. In an unusual diplomatic intervention, the US President Donald Trump wrote to President Herzog asking for Netanyahu's pardon, describing the prosecution as political, unjustified, and appealing for the premier to be allowed to unite Israel via a pardon. Herzog's office responded that Israel's law requires the individual to apply for a pardon themselves and that the president cannot act based solely on a foreign leader's request. Netanyahu's office restated that he will not apply for a pardon that requires an admission of guilt. The episode has stirred debate in Israel about foreign influence, separation of powers, and prosecutorial independence. David Barnea, director of Mossad since 2021, has requested to step down in June 2026. He is the last top defense figure still serving from the October 7 era. His tenure is viewed as one of the most intense in Israel's intelligence history, having overseen covert operations, hostage negotiations, and the so-called pager operation. 3 candidates are reportedly being considered as his successor: a senior Mossad deputy known by the codename Aleph, a senior operations official Chet, and Major General Roman Goffman, the Prime Minister's military secretary. A smooth transition is planned. Tehran has ramped up its media and military posture. The Tasnim news agency on the 12th of November 2025 released Missiles over Bazan, the first Hebrew-language documentary produced in Iran aimed at Israeli audiences. The film claims Iran inflicted heavy and significant damage on Israel during last June's 12-day conflict, particularly targeting Haifa's oil refinery. At the same time, Iran opened a missile exhibition in Tehran to mark Aerospace Week, displaying ballistic missiles, drones and other equipment at the IRGC Aerospace Force Museum. However, analysts note that Iran is simultaneously facing major internal challenges, its worst water crisis in decades, widespread electricity and gas shortages, and accumulating pressure from international sanctions. Israel and others argue these domestic issues undermine Iran's military autonomy narrative, even as Tehran projects strength outwardly. The handover of hostages remains, while painful, signals that the mechanism of the ceasefire deal and hostage for prisoner exchanges continues to operate, albeit slowly and under pressure. The ongoing presence of active militant pockets in Gaza, especially around Rafah, means the security situation remains tense. Israel's military readiness drive, integrating new structural divisions, carrying out large-scale drills and adapting to lessons from the October 7 attacks, reflects an acknowledgement of shifting threat dynamics. On the domestic front, the Netanyahu trial and the unusual US involvement raise questions about judicial independence, foreign influence and the health of Israel's democratic institutions. The upcoming replacement of Mossad's director adds another key dimension, marking a transition in a critical security agency. Finally, Iran's media and military posturing underscore the broader regional dimension, a shifting, multi-pronged confrontation that includes information warfare, missile diplomacy, and a battle for narrative legitimacy. Yet Iran's internal economic and humanitarian struggles add deeper complexity to its outward strength claims.